We're continuing on Hilchot Kriyat Shema Shel Aruch HaRachaim Siman Samech Gimel. We're up to Seif Hey of Tzadi Zayin Amud Bet of the regular prince of Mishna Berurah. Maran writes, Im haya yashen misarim oto meirim oto ad sheikra pasuk rishon v'hu er mamash. If a person is falling asleep and is dozing off while saying Shema, you see that the person is not really fully there, is not awake. For the first pasuk of Shema, we make sure that he's up, even if it takes shaking him off his slumber, so to speak. We want to make sure that he is up and awake completely, as the Gemara says, and that is for the first pasuk. Mikan va'elach, from there on, and mesari noto. We don't have to put him through pain in order to make sure he's completely awake. Even if he's reading it while being a little bit sleepy, still yatsa, still is good, and he's going to be yotzeh. And of course, someone that is shatui v'shikor, we're going to discuss later on in Siman Saditet, if a person has drunk alcoholic beverages, what the halacha would be for him. But nevertheless, mitnamnem v'hu adin ones achera mebatel kavanato yatsa. Any other onus, any other force that takes away his kavanam, still, if you're talking about the subsequent psukim after the first one, you're yotze. Al kol panim karakula, because at the end of the day, he read everything. And he's yotze. But if he fell asleep, deep in sleep, then, of course, he's not going to be yotze. Now, we mentioned before the Kafachayim that says if you have some sort of a push, some sort of onus that you couldn't properly say Kriyat Shema b'kavanah, as long as you said it in a way that at the moment you're yotze, that you fulfilled your obligation, then you don't have to go back and say Shema again, even if afterwards the situation became better and now you could sit and read the entire thing b'kavanah. Still, you don't need to do that because it is the scenario that you were where you did it was halachically fine, and therefore you don't have to go back and do it over again. Now, says the Mishna Berurah, Chafetz Chaim writes, Yesh shalosh deot ben haposkim. There are three main shitot as to what is the baseline of the mitzvah Kriyat Shema. Yesh omrim diak pasuk rishon bilvad hu min haTorah. There are those who say only the first pasuk is midoraita. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, and we said perhaps Baruch Shem is part of that. Chacham Ovadia has a tshuva in Yebia Omer in Chelek Chet Siman Vav Ot Vav, and he writes that most Rishonim, and he also paskins like that, Chaim also paskins like that. So most Rishonim hold that the first pasuk of Shema is only biblical, is the Oraita, the rest of it is not. There are those who say the entire parasha Rishonah is midoraita, and then there are those who say even the second one, the parasha Vehaya, is also from the Torah. So you have this debate, and again, Chacham Ovadia says Maran Shulchan Aruch holds only pasuk Rishon is the Oraita, only first pasuk Shema, and that's the Ikar Adin. Now, says the Chafetz Chaim something very important. Uparashat Tzitzit, the third parasha of Shema, Vayomer, which has at the end of it the topic of Yetziat Mitzrayim, of remembering that Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim, that according to everyone is the Oraita. Because you have to remember and remind yourself of Yetziat Mitzrayim. Therefore, that according to everyone is the Oraita. Now, the Chesed Alafim, Rabbi Eliezer Popo, the author of Pel Yoetz, he writes that when you get to the psukim, Ani Hashem Elokechem Asher Hotzeti Etchem Meretz Mitzrayim, you should pause and you should think that I am doing hereby the mitzvah of Zechirat Yetziat Mitzrayim, because that's a biblical mitzvah. We just got finished saying that according to everyone, the third parasha of Shema, because of this pasuk, is the oraita, and hence you have to plug this back to what we learned before, mitzvot tzrichot kavanah, that you need to have kavanah in order to be yotzeh from your obligation of the mitzvah, and therefore you say it mindfully that here I am doing a mitzvah, the oraita, to have kavanah for it. Says the Mishna Berurah, they just established this to be said in Kriyat Shema, but really is a separate mitzvah d'oraita, and therefore you should say it mindfully. Maran writes in Seif Vav, HaKoreh Kriyat Shema lo yirmoz be'enav v'lo yikros b'sfatav. A person that's busy reading Shema, he should not hint to people with his eyes. He should not hint with his mouth, right? Trying to, saying something with his mouth and so on, without saying it. You don't have to point. You shouldn't point with your fingers. This is in Parashat Rishonah, which is the main part of accepting Hashem's yoke, is in Parashat Rishonah, and therefore you don't want to be communicating with the world outside, even though that you're using sign language of your eyes and your hand and your mouth and so on without talking, but nevertheless it takes away from your kavanah, and therefore that a person should not do, at least in Parashat Rishonah, when he is accepting all Malchut Shamayim upon himself. And the Shcharuch ends saying, because this looks like you don't have any kavod and any kiviut for accepting the yoke of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it says in the pasuk in Dvarim, v'dibarta bam v'darshinan. We darshin the Gemara in Yuma Daf Yutet Amud Bet. The Gemara says, "Aseh otam keva." The v'dibarta bam means this is what we talk in. It's kavua. It's what you're doing. It has to be the main thing, the main focus. So if you are saying it, lip service, and at the same time you are hinting with your hand and you're trying to communicate with other people with body language, so then what keva is that? So therefore, says the Shulchan Aruch, you should not do that. You should not try to communicate. You just close your eyes, or you look into the Sidur and you say it properly without being disturbed by any other thing from the outside. Says the Mishna Berurah, Lo yirmoz afilu lidbar mitzvah asur lirmoz. It's not just that you can't do it for your own purposes, but you cannot do it even for the bar mitzvah. Now, Kavachayim that we mentioned before already, and Or Letzion, they both say that even if you stay quiet in the middle of Shema and you pause basically with not speaking, and you say, well, so I paused, I'm not saying the words, so I want to communicate something, a message to somebody, I'll pause. I'll communicate by hinting with my hand, with my finger, with my eyes, lips, whatever it is. And then I come back to Shema, says the Kaf HaChaim, says Or Letzion, you should not do that. Even though that you are not saying actively the words, you paused, you put it on hold, so to speak, you still should not do that, because it's not because of bitul kavanah. It's not because it destroys your kavanah only, that too, but it's not the only reason. The reason is because you show that this is not keva. And when you pause and put Shema on hold for something else, so that's also a problem of keva. You're showing that there's something else that's more important, more kavua than Shema, than accepting Hashem's yoke. That is, of course, not a proper conduct either. Now, for Kriyat Shema Lamita, the Ben Ish Chai writes that even though that Kriyat Shema Lamita is not an obligation, nevertheless, still is important enough that you should not do any of these things that the Shulchan Aruch says you cannot hint, you cannot communicate. You just say Shema with kavanah and do nothing else. Says another point over here. Mishna Berurah said basically that Lidvar mitzvah is asur to hint, not just for your purposes, but even if you're doing a mitzvah, still is prohibited to communicate with other people. Now, how about if a person is doing an averah? You see someone is doing something that halachically is wrong. So the Kaf Chaim says there you could stop, pause, and hint to them, that they're doing something wrong. To stop them from an averah, you could do that. And not only that, says the Kaf Chaim, you could even pause and speak. Tell them, don't do that. What you're doing is asur. To separate a person from doing an averah is mutar. Now, how about staka? An ani comes. This happens all the time, right? A meshulach or a poor person comes in, and they come in. Sometimes they come with a driver, sometimes they come themselves, but they have to try to spread their love to other shuls as well. So they have to go. They're not necessarily staying. So some shuls have a rule that they don't collect. The Gabbai does it, and so on. It's, each one has pluses and minuses. But imagine it, Ani comes to you and he wants taka, and you're in the middle of Shema, right? So Rabbi Eliyahu writes that because it's a mitzvah overet, if you wait until you finish the parasha, the Ani is going to be gone. Maybe you lose the opportunity of staka, the opportunity of helping. So therefore, he says you could stop the reading. Don't continue reading and be busy with staka. Stop reading. Take your staka out, give it to him, and go back to reading because it's mitzvah overet. And he says, be careful that the gabayet staka in the shul should not be going around the shul during Shema, or the aniyim should be a sign or something that they should not be gathering money in duration of Shema. If lechatchila you could change the situation, do it in that way. But if it already happened that the guy is there standing by you and you're ignoring him because you're saying Shema, says Rabbi Eliyahu, it's a zchut to be giving tzedakah. And once I'm at this, I want to just mention something. We sometimes you get tired. There, different people come, and depending on the community, sometimes in certain communities you could have 20 people coming every day to gather tzedakah. Now, some people don't have the means to give to 20 people, so you give whatever you can, or you give smaller amounts, whatnot. But in the core of it, a person has to not lose sight of the fact that at the end of the day, it's a zchut to be helping, to be on the giving end. It's a zchut. It's something important to not ignore and not to look down upon. So again, especially because there are people who are not really legitimate, and like the Gemara says, because of the charlatans, we are, they save us from Geinam. That when we don't give to Ani, you're not going to be punished in the same way because maybe he is not legit and we've been burnt enough with unworthy causes that it becomes difficult. But at the same time, after everything's said and done, it's a zchut to give, and that's something to be mindful. I went to, many years ago, discussing with one of the Rabbanim in town, Rabbi Sauer here, and as I'm coming out of his place, see, he had 2 mezuzot on the door. The same door, it's asur to have 2 mezuzos. One of them was in the same doorpost. One of them was outside the metal screen that we have on the outside door, and one of them was inside. It's the same doorpost. So I looked at him and I was like, 2 mezuzos on the same door? What are you doing? So I said, no. The outside one is just a show. It's just an empty case of mezuzah. I was, you have an empty case of mezuzah on your door for what? He said, because if I don't have that, only have the actual one, then the aniyim, the meshulachim, can't see that this is a Jewish house from outside, and they won't come to collect tzedakah. So I have an empty case of mezuzah on the outside for them to know this is a Jewish house to come and collect tzedakah. So I from the laughter all over the place, I know I don't have to explain that some people would say let me put this screen on in order to cover the mezuzah that no one should come. But that's not the Jewish mindset. The Jewish mindset is it's a zchut to give. It's a zchut to be on the helping side, on the giving end of things. So that is a Mordechai Eliyahu. If you have a mitzvah over it, you of course would want to give, you would want to be helping. So therefore you pause, you give, and then you continue. Says the Mishna Berurah further, of course, you can't smell tabak or what people do. It goes around the shul sometimes in certain kihilot. So that's, of course, something that you have to be mindful. You cannot do it. Ben Ish Chai, and the Kaf HaChaim, right? Also, back in the day when they didn't have central air, it was hot. You had a fan, a hand fan, like a manifai, they would fan themselves, right? So Mishra says that, of course, you cannot do that when you're saying Shema. Like if Chaim says the same thing, so that's also part of something that shows is not kavua. It takes away from the proper kavanam. So again, you have to get these details from the poskim, from the achronim. We're supposed to, apply it accordingly to other activities as well. Parasha Rishonam, v'yesh machmirin gam beparasha shniya. So this, Maran said only in Parasha Rishonah, in Parasha Shema, but there are those who are mahmir, even in the second parasha. The Magen Avraham brings this in the name of actually Maran in Kesef Mishneh, and the Rambam. So the Mishna Berurah brings it. Ach lidvar mitzvah lekula alma mutar. But Chafetz Chaim says even if you want to be mahmir like that in Parashat V'haya, lidvar mitzvah. That's if you're doing it for a mitzvah, then you could hint. You could hint in the second parasha, and on that note, the reason that's only parasha Rishonah, because the words v'dibarta bam, which shows that the Kriyat Shema has to be kavua, it's really mentioned in parasha Rishonah. So therefore, it's more important in parasha Shniya. It says the daber bam. It's a little bit different. So therefore, the Kaf HaChaim says that v'dibarta bam is the command on the reading of Shema, and therefore you have this this item to be careful in the first parasha to read it properly and to not do anything else. Show that this is kavua. This is the main thing that you're engaged with. Now, the Ben Ish Chai and the Kaf HaChaim, they both write that if you want to hint and communicate with body language with someone for no mitzvah, for just a personal thing, even in Parashat Shenya is asur. So they're both mahmir, that even though the Maran says Parashat Rishonah, for Dvar Rashut in Parashat Shenya also will be prohibited to communicate for no mitzvah, for just personal reasons. So that's something to be mindful of. For mitzvah, you could do it in second parasha. Now, how about if your son, who is a minor, is next to you, you want to hint to them to say Shema, right? Everyone is makpid, but the kid should be saying Shema. So you start your Shema, Baruch Shem, you uncover your eye and you see your son is playing. Now, what do? Now, you're in the middle of Shema now. And your son is there. You want to, you want to make sure that they're going to be saying it. So what do? So it says the Ben Ish Chai, even though the katan is not chayav to daven, is not obligated to tefillah, but nevertheless, it is the mitzvah of the father to do chinuch. It's a whole machloket who the mitzvah of chinuch is on and so on. But nevertheless, Meshchai says that's considered a mitzvah. So not in Parasha Rishonah, but in Parasha Shniya, you could already do that. So first, finish your Ve'ahavta, and then once you start Ve'aya, or before Ve'aya, you could hint to your son the Sorach Mitzvah, that will be mutar. Now, the Ben Ish Chai says the Gabbai Tzedakah cannot go around while people are saying Shema. And he says you can't even do it in Parashat Shniya, he writes. The whole Shema is a problem. right? Because even though that the Dvar Mitzvah, you could do it, but you are going around the shul and you're reading at the same time, then is considered a Kriyat Arai. Therefore, he says it's worse than a regular thing. You're going, your mind completely is off of Shema, you're busy going around and collecting the tzedakah. Therefore, it is not a proper conduct, says the Ben Ish Chai, and Maran would perhaps perhaps would be more lenient on that, but nevertheless, that's the Ben Ish Chai, and as something to be mindful of. Bezat Hashem will continue this in the days to come.
What is